My pen.
Don't forget to not have your phone going, and
I know.
because that's
Turn it
annoying.
off.
You
Turn it
did,
off.
so did I. I turned off all of the noise. Hello, everybody. What's going on in the land of fish keeping this fine day? I hope that you can hear us. I hope that, let me just check one other thing and make sure. Wait, hold on. Here we
Is this
go.
live?
Yeah, there's a delay between our new crazy awesome software and the software that, and the YouTube thing. So hopefully, yeah, you can hear us, I think. So glad that you're hanging out with us this fine evening on a Wednesday. And we have a subject today, don't we? Do you know what the subject is?
Front grounds.
Front. Yes. I think it's really, I don't think enough people paint the front of their tank. So I just feel like maybe we should take more time to paint the front of our tank, because then it's a mystery what's going on in your aquarium.
That's
Isn't
right.
that the most
Yep.
exciting thing ever?
You have to look at it
So
through
we're
the
going to talk
side.
about the new trend, painting the front and the sides of your aquarium and trying to look at the fish through the back side of your fish tank, through all the cords and filters and other things. It's a new thing. It's the trend for 2024, and I started it. We started it here, Primetime Aquatics community. Thank you so much for being here. Glad you're hanging out with us. Do you see how big now?
That's great.
This chat,
Oh my
if I
gosh.
can't read that, I've got some things going on because I made it huge. The chat is gigantic. So, yeah, we're well, to be clear, because I never actually finished the statement, we are, in fact, going to be talking about fish tank backgrounds. And I just think it dawned on me yesterday and a little bit today when I was downstairs looking at our fish tanks, and I was looking at the ones that we're putting up in the gallery, and the choices that we had to make when it comes to the fish tank backgrounds. And I think it's something that can play a really important role in your aquarium in more ways than you might realize. And I wanted to make sure that, especially for those of you who are looking at possibly getting new fish tanks for the holidays and setting up new aquariums, it's just something that might be a good idea to investigate and to really think about.
Well, Bruce said I couldn't be more surprised if I woke up with my head sewn to the.
Yes.
floor.
Yes. Joanna got me
Classic.
this T-shirt, so it's the last one before the holidays, and I don't know, I'm going backwards here, but yeah, Christmas vacation shirt, and it's it's like a shield over here. This iron-on is quite dynamic. I feel like if I got punched in the chest right now, it would
Cap
be.
America.
Yes, I feel it's very strong.
And if you were Captain America, that would make you the best Marvel superhero.
No, it
Look
wouldn't.
at that.
Not even close. Iron Man, there's no debate here. We all know that Iron Man would have beat Captain America if Marvel was reflecting reality in that moment when they fought. It's all Iron Man has to do is fly up like 20 feet, drop some missiles on Captain America. Game over. I'm sorry, but truth had to just spill out early here in the live stream. But we can go back to Allison. Thank you so much, by the way, for the super chat. Appreciate you being here, hanging out with us this fine evening. We are going to be talking about backgrounds today. We are going to be doing a giveaway because it's the last giveaway we're going to do before Christmas happens this week. So I wanted to do one more in case maybe there's some of you who are like wishing for certain things, and then Christmas happens and you're like, well, I didn't exactly get what I wanted. At least maybe this for somebody will make your Christmas time a little bit happier. I mean, you won't get it before Christmas because it's too late for that, but it's an after Christmas present by the time you get it in the mail. So I think that's going to be pretty darn cool. So things, places, videos. Okay, so what have we done? Videos for this past time. I have no idea. What did I do for Sunday? Somebody help me out. I'm just totally blanking. What did I do?
I watched it.
I did too. Well, I mean, I made it. So, all right. Who knows? Who remembers what I did for Sunday? Because I'm
totally drawing a blank.
Oh, I know what I did. It was the top 10 beginner fish, which if you haven't seen it, even though most of you here are not beginners, there's still 10 really cool fish. And my criteria, thank you, Kat, my criteria for these top 10 cool fish is they had to be hardy, they had to be personable, they had to be dynamic in the sense that or adaptable, I should say, in wide range of water parameters, and you had to be able to fit them in a tank that is conducive to most people who are beginning 10, 20 gallons. So if you're looking for fish like that, that is something to certainly consider. Your video on the small scape today, what did you do?
I showed the plants that are in that tank, some by accident, some on purpose, but those are all my favorites that go very, very nicely with tiny fish, specifically one particular inhabitant in there that's going to be inspiring its very own scape.
Okay, so that's what happened on the small scape. Tomorrow we'll have the members video out. Got a lot of really, really awesome fish, and some fish we've never had before, and some fish that are a little bit harder to find in the aquarium hobby. So those, hopefully, if they make it through quarantine, and there's never 100% guarantee that that's going to happen, but if they do, in January, they will be ready to go for people to enjoy. Sunday, our goal is to have a video out for the next aquarium in the gallery. That's the goal. We've hardscaped it. I say we. I tried real hard again. Do you think I did an okay job with the hardscape? I mean,
Yeah,
it was,
I like it.
you inspired it because you went down there, you threw some, so I don't want to just take credit for the entire vision. You went down there, you threw some wood in the tank. I was like, oh, that's a cool style. Then when you took it all out.
No, I set it on top of the stand.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And then I went down there and you selected all the pieces, and then I went down there and did what I'm comfortable doing. And that is I put the wood in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And then the rocks, and then you glued it all together so that it would, because I've never done that before. So I'm like, can you please glue it? She's like, don't you know how to use a bottle of glue? I'm like, yeah, but I don't know if I can glue all the wood together into the rocks to keep it all down. You know, I've never done it before. So you helped out there, which was very nice of you. And then now we have the planting to do, which is going to be the next couple of days, and then we'll fill it with water. We'll get it all stocked up lightly at first because we've got some pretty large fish going in there, but I've got a ton of cycle filter media from the tanks from which they're coming from, and we'll get some of the major inhabitants in that aquarium. It's a 125 for those of you who don't know. So that is what is happening.
I'm super excited. Throughout the day, I'm always excited to run down there and take a look at it because I really like it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be cool, and I like the substrate that we picked out too. So that video hopefully will be out on Sunday. Places we're going to be nowhere the rest of this year. We've got 3 swaps coming up in January. The 7th is Greater Chicago Cichlid Association in Northbrook, Illinois. The 14th is Quad City in Davenport, Iowa. And then on the 26th is Greenwater Aquarius Society in Tinley Park. So that is what's going on there. Brett, thank you so much for becoming a prime time partner. Really appreciate it. That's pretty stinking awesome.
Where's our thing?
What? You left it in the... Oh my gosh, she's going to be right back.
Right back.
Because she's got to go get something real fast. So while she's doing that, so our subject for this fine day, again, we're going to be talking about aquarium backgrounds because not only just the color of the background, but the style of the background can have a really, really strong impact on your aquarium, on your fish, on the aquascape. But there's some advantages and disadvantages to doing all kinds of different things. But before we get into that, we want to show off one thing. So go ahead, because you got it. We didn't get to plug it in because the USB, I couldn't find it a way around you're reflecting us. That's pretty crazy.
Is that funny?
Yeah.
Look.
So here, how about if I do this? Because you're reflecting everything.
So are you.
So I'm reflecting.
I see my water bottle.
I see water bottle,
Here, how
chats.
about up?
Anyway, I don't know how to.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So.
This is from Oink.
Yeah.
And Crystal sent this out for us, and it's so awesome.
It's
it
awesome.
lights
Thank
up.
Thank you, by the way.
But we don't have, within reach, we don't have a USB.
Yeah.
But
not only that, I don't really want to reveal that part of it until we actually get to
the studio,
the gallery.
Right, the gallery.
And once we do that, then this is going to go in the background. But it's going to be awesome. It illuminates, and you'll be able to read it once it's illuminated. So, but thank you so much for that. That was super awesome. That was very, very cool. So, yeah, very awesome thing. Let me go over here real fast. And so this is like a new thing that I've got going on here. Check this out.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Isn't that pretty awesome? So I can actually bring up the chats that, of course, everybody's seeing it as I do it. But hey, it's new. Okay, so cut me some slack, man.
He's been playing with this program all day.
I know. There's so many things with this. I can't wait to demonstrate all the things and some of the things I've learned. But anyway, Leslie, thank you so much for the super chat. You helped me decide to buy Roseline barbs. When I asked about them a few months back, they are fabulous. They have become one of 3 types of fish that I will always keep. Great advice. Merry Christmas. Well, Merry Christmas to you too. And thank you so much for that. Roseline sharks. By the way, that's one of the fish that we have in the that we just brought in, they're awesome. I mean, first of all, for us, you never know what you're going to get. We import the vast majority of our fish now, and over the course of the last couple of years, you learn what's going to come in relatively healthy and what might be problematic. And I will say, without question, the roseline sharks are some of the hardiest fish we ever get. It's so rare that we lose even a single one in the quarantine process. And for the people who get them from us in the swaps, absolutely love them. If you're not familiar with the roseline shark, it can get about 6 inches or so. Great fish, relatively peaceful. Keep them in groups. Because they get so large, a 4-foot tank is definitely advisable there. But such an awesome fish. It really is. So backgrounds, let's get there, and then we can answer questions a little bit later. So when it comes to backgrounds, one of the things that you missed, what I said, was there's advantages and disadvantages to doing each type of background. Yes. All right, whether it's color, not having a background, 3D. And I wanted to just spend a few minutes. We're not going to spend like endless hours. And by the way, again, we do have a giveaway a little bit later, but I wanted to talk about these various backgrounds. And I think the obvious first thing, and now I'm going to play with one of my little features here. Are you ready? So one of the obvious things that you can do with a background. Oh, it worked. Look, we're still in here and we have a picture. Pictures. Everybody's been asking for them forever. So this was a picture of a tank that you aquascaped. It was in our living room and it didn't have a background.
No.
So it just had the wall behind it. It took on the color of whatever the wall was behind the fish tank. Now in this particular, it looks kind of purpley for some reason, but in reality, the walls that we have, I guess they kind of have they're white, but they have like a bluish sort of very faint tint to them. I would say so.
Not blue.
She's wrong. No, I don't know what color, bluish, grayish. It's not pure like Snow White. Anyway, point being, when you look at this, what are the advantages of doing a tank with no background at all?
Well, first of all, you could change it at any point. You could put a background at any point.
Absolutely true.
Very easily by just slapping one on.
Yes.
You can definitely see all the back. You can, especially if you're going to be seeing it from more than 3 sides, like here, if you're going to be seeing it from all sides. That's why this does not have a background, because it was done for the Awaza booth, and that needs to be seen by all sides.
And just as a side note, that filter was the filter that we used at the Aquashella. We scaled that down quite a bit when we kept that tank long term. I think we put like a small aqua clear on there just to make it more size appropriate, so we didn't have this massive filter hanging off the side of the aquarium. But that was originally when you brought it home, and then we kind of reset it up. So yeah, no background is certainly an option. Now can I mention some of the potential disadvantages to having no background whatsoever on an aquarium?
Yeah, like the cord.
Like the cord, right? So one of the things, and the hang on back filter that actually went on the back of the aquarium instead of the side of the aquarium, that was certainly something else that was visible. So you're going to see the equipment, you're going to see the cords, you're going to see the hoses behind the aquarium. And for some people, it's like, who cares? And that's perfectly fine, by the way, not a big deal. But if that bothers you, then maybe putting a background on the aquarium may be helpful. The other thing is it really depends on the wall color too. So if your wall color is very brightly colored, maybe it's just, I don't know, it's we're back in the 1970s, it's orange or like a bright red or something like that, or it's in a kid's room and you have this really bright colored wall, or it's wallpaper or something like that.
Or green. Yeah,
then some of your fish are going to blend into the background and you might not be able to see them as easily, and so it could take away a little bit from there, right? The other thing to consider is when you are aquascaping, right? Again, if you don't have a background, sometimes it can be a little bit hard to match the style that you're going for, I would say, right? And then one thing that's going to happen too without a background, especially without a darker background, we're going to get to this in a second, is if there's any algae on the back of the glass, that can sometimes be really hard to get to, right? And so now you have to spend a little bit more time maintaining all 4 sides of the aquarium, if you will. But it's not all bad, because you mentioned that there are times when you want to be able to see the aquarium from all 4 sides. This was Jen Williams and what she did at the last Aquashella, and it was one of my favorite tanks in all of Aquashella. I thought it was absolutely stunning, and what was cool about that particular aquarium is you could see all 4 sides, and she scaped it in such a way where it was very interesting from all 4 sides. So that was pretty cool. Of course, now the disadvantages, of course, you can see right through it. And so if there's things going on in the background that you are distracting or something like that, that's going to be visible, right? But again, if you want to add something later, you can always do that. But this tank, and I've featured this tank twice now. It was once in the Aquashella video, and then when I did the species profile on the rosy barbs a couple weeks ago, this was obviously the tank that I used because it's ridiculously crazy. So
pretty much, we love it.
It's pretty awesome. Now, of course, there's another option. That other option is you could paint a color onto your tank. Now, this was a tank that I saw. I actually did a video about it. It was probably a couple years ago. One of the guys from one of our fish clubs had this particular tank, and I believe it was like a 220 or 240 gallon aquarium. And he decided to paint the back of his tank blue. And so that's certainly an option, and it gives it a little bit, there's just something about it where now you're not seeing all the equipment in the background, right? And you can obviously paint a tank whatever color you want. Now, for me, this one, again, we still have some potential issues there, right? One potential issue is, again, because it's a lighter color blue, you could see algae on this. And so you might still be left. And in this case, you don't have a tank stock like that with spotless, no algae on there without doing a considerable amount of work. And I think he was doing a fair amount of work to make sure that particular aquarium looked as nice and as clean as it did. Anything else about the blue that you might caution against, if anything?
Well, I would say for, if you have blue fish, but a lot of the mechanics are black, and so they're going to show up more than a black background.
That's actually a good point. It's not something I was immediately thinking about, and that is, you see the heater there. You see some of the line that, maybe an intake or a return. If that's darker in color, then you're probably going to see a lot more of that than if the background was black. So certainly something to keep in mind. I would say the other thing too is, depending on the fish that you choose, again, some of them might blend, believe it or not, some of them might blend a little bit into the background. A lot of times when people paint their tanks blue, sometimes it's a darker blue color, but not always. I did a fish room tour of Mike Helford's fish room. Mm-hmm. And all of it, his whole fish room was blue. His walls were blue, his stands were blue, and I think the backs of all the tanks were blue. And it actually was very striking, and people really enjoyed that when I did that fish room tour. Yeah, and it was a really nice fish room. So you've got that. Obviously, if for those of you who've been watching the channel for a while, you know that, especially when I'm setting up a tank, the vast majority of our aquariums, the backs are painted black. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, I just like to hide everything. I like the fact that it just seems like the back kind of in some ways isn't there. And so you're really focused on the inhabitants of the tank. Now, there are some downsides to that. And what would you say the downsides are to doing what I've done?
Well, I think you can definitely see algae, but you can see algae with any color.
Oh, yeah, but this is the least likely where you're going to see algae, without a doubt.
Well, are you talking painting?
Yes.
Well, then you can't change it up, and that's why I don't paint my backgrounds.
Yeah, and I know you've done, by the way, if you want to see a ton of videos, there's a video about different types of backgrounds that we've done, like an edited video in the description below. But if you go to the Smallscape, you've done a few videos on how to DIY backgrounds without making them permanent. So you can do a dark blue, you can do a black, you can cut it and use certain materials where it's relatively waterproof, and then change it out if you want to. So that's certainly a thing. There was one thing that I wanted to answer because it was a really good question. Look at that. Boom. All I had to do was click the button. Phil says, does the type of paint matter? I've considered it with my 2 tanks. Yeah, it does matter. I can tell you what I do, and I don't have experience doing other things. I know some people will spray paint the backs of the aquariums. I don't do that. I use, what is the stuff that I use?
You use acrylic.
I use acrylic paint.
Just like a craft paint.
Yeah, I think we get it at Hobby Lobby. I use a roller. I roll it on. It usually takes about 3 coats. It really, really important. Do a coat. Make sure it dries completely before you do the next coat. Otherwise, as you go over it with the next coat, it just tears up the one that you just did. So it always takes me 3 coats of black acrylic paint. The nice thing about that, I think it's the best of all worlds. It's not totally permanent. In fact, when I broke down the one side of the fish room, all those tanks were painted, and some of them I scraped the backgrounds off, and it was really easy. All I did was take a spray bottle with some water, I soaked it, left it for a few minutes, then took a razor blade and it just literally just came right off. So it's definitely not all super permanent, which is nice. But at the same time, you have to be careful that when you're putting hang-on back filters and stuff on, you can scratch it up a little bit. Super easy to touch up too. So that stuff is really great. But the black backgrounds to me, and this is another example here with the rummy nose tank that you recently rescaped, I just like it because the background is fading. You don't see the algae as much. You don't see the equipment. And when you look at a picture like this, the plants are sticking out. Look at those rummy nose rasboras. By the way, you hear us talk about those fish all the time. It's one of my all-time favorite rasboras. That's why. Otherwise known as the Sawa rasbora. Look at those fish. Look at that orange face. The males look like that. The females are a little bit more green. But that's what I like about the darker backgrounds. And if I could only pick one, that would be mine. So if you could only pick one style of background, what would it be? This wasn't supposed to stump you.
Well, it would probably have to be a black vinyl.
Yeah. Okay. So, but black in color, right? So
yeah, probably really dark.
That makes sense. One of the things that I like, and it can be very striking, but you have to be super careful with it when it comes to color backgrounds. And this was a tank that was from Aquatic Experience 2019. I believe this was Jeff Miyake's crew that did this. Mm-hmm. It was one of my all-time favorite tanks that I've ever seen in my entire life. It was an underwater forest. It was, in real life, it was mesmerizing. I've never looked at a tank so long in my life as I looked at this aquarium. And it was the aquarium that I used to actually highlight the rasboras that you see at the pork chop or Harlequin rasbora. But you see the background. Mm-hmm. It's kind of an opaque-ish white light background.
I like that type of background.
I do too. Now, what's the advantage here compared to what we've talked about so far with the other colors? Do you have one?
What's the advantage compared to others? I don't know what advantage you would say.
Well, I know what advantage I would say, and that is the background doesn't exist. There's no back to the aquarium. That's the whole point of using these backgrounds, is that it just seems like an ocean. Like everything is infinite, right? The water is infinite. That, I think, is one of the downsides to doing what I do with the black backgrounds, is sometimes it can be a very abrupt sort of stopping point for your eye.
That's what I think, but I thought you said that you like the black because it disappears.
I do love it. Well, it brings into focus all the other stuff in the aquarium.
True.
Right?
True. But I think it does. It definitely does.
Yeah, there's a stop there, right? And some people, in terms of the way that they perceive stuff, is like, you know what? I don't know if I like that. Where something like this, it just makes it look like you're not seeing any of the stuff, like any of the equipment and all that, but it makes it look like the tank goes on forever. And I think it's really cool. MD uses frosted backgrounds a lot. Yeah, a lot of high-end aquascapers, and I would consider him to be one, they do that. And this is the reason why, because it just seems like your aquatic environment lasts forever. And that can be really cool. Here's another example here where you have just this. Now you can see a little bit, you can see the shadow of the hang-on back filter back there. There's a downside to this, and it's substantial when you have a tank that has been up and running for a while, and we've already discussed it, and that is these tanks that you see that are first set up looking like this, they're going to get algae, most likely. And when they do, again, now you are maintaining 4 sides of your aquarium, and it may not look so good, right? And it can be hard to get to. Imagine like this tank and then the one I just showed you. Imagine this other aquarium where you're trying to get an algae. Could you imagine by the way, all of this wood stuck up above the water surface. So now you're trying to get an algae scraper back there. I think I'd probably just want to break down and cry a good cry about that.
I don't think that tank would be set up that long, personally, because you'd have to maintain the back.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I see what you're saying. But most of these aquariums that you see, when they're like this, either there's an excessive amount of maintenance time that's going on, or like you just mentioned, somebody's setting this up and then you see the next video 4 months later, what happened to my tank? And you're like, oh boy, gosh. So if you were looking at these aquariums and you're like, I would like to replicate that, just know it's going to take a lot more work to keep these types of aquariums looking their best compared to if you use a really dark or black background. So, and there's no right or wrong answer. There's no, this is better than this. It's just how much work do you want to do? Someone else brought up a good point here, Fish Hippie, and that is put a color changing LED behind the frosted background. That looks pretty cool.
That looks amazing.
Where I don't remember at the Aquashellas, there was a company that was doing that for a long time. I shot that tank a number of times. It was a tiger barb tank.
Yeah.
I remember for the life of me, I cannot remember the name. And they're not there anymore.
It was a bar. It was a light bar.
It was a light bar, and it would change colors. And it was pretty cool.
You can do that with so many DIYs now.
And
for
I think
cars.
you did that as well
I did.
in one of the kitchen tanks, right?
Well, no, in the Aquatop tank that I did, and Lisa did one.
Okay.
And remember?
Yeah, but that was in the
did.
kitchen.
No.
Wasn't it?
No, it was up here.
Okay.
And I did a knockoff frosted background. I used wax paper.
Yeah, that's right.
Which
wax
is
paper, super cheap, easy to maintain.
DIY.
Yeah.
And then I just for my own, I just had a little light back there. You can get so many little battery operated lights. It was really sweet.
Yeah, very cool thing.
Cute.
And of course, if you don't want to do any of that and you want to go a little crazy, you have the option to do the 3D background. Mm-hmm. And I've done a couple videos on this. If you just search up 3D background Primetime Aquatics, those videos will come up. I've done at least 2. Love them. They're pretty awesome. That's why we've got quite a few of them in our 40-gallon breeders. We've got a couple in our 20 gallons. This is 3D. It was just, this was one of the Similus, or not Similus, Neolamprologus multifasciatus, the multi-shell dweller. You can kind of see the little guys there. And love this look. I really consider doing 3D backgrounds in all of the aquariums that we discussed for the gallery, all 5, well, 4 of them, because the one was going to be in the middle. What's the downside? Why did you say, I don't know about that?
Well, I think it makes the tank, personally, I think it makes the tank look super, super small. And then, of course, I think you're really limited for, obviously, the rocks that you're going to be using because they need to match. So I have a lot of negatives for the 3D background.
See, now I disagree. I don't think the tank looks any... Yes, in reality, the tank is going to lose volume with a 3D background, but I don't think it makes it look smaller. I think it makes it look like a slice of nature. If the 3D background is high quality, and I consider these ones, somebody mentioned Universal Rocks. That's where we got ours from. We've got another one coming in later from Aqua Decor that's supposed to be here in the next week or so for one of the tanks that we're doing in the gallery. So really looking forward to that one. But I absolutely love this look. This is another one here where it was more of an earth tone background. That's got the Congo tetras and our volcano bitterlings in there as well. Did a species profile on both of them. The volcano bitterlings came out like maybe a month ago. That's the orange-ish fish. Crazy awesome. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. But I love that look. I think that is a very natural type of look. And it just looks like a slice of nature. There's another downside to these.
Well, cleaning and the getting behind there.
Yeah, you don't clean these things. It's just whatever grows on them. It just adds to the natural look.
That's what I mean.
But
they may bug certain people.
Yeah.
It might bug me.
Catching Can I tell you a story? If you learn nothing today, if you hear nothing else today, do not expect to ever catch smart fish out of the tank with a 3D background again. Ever. Because in my infinite wisdom, a couple of the aquariums that have 3D backgrounds, we emptied them out. I'm like, I'll just use it as a quarantine tank while it's open. I can tell you from personal experience, there are a lot of fish that figure out, guess what? If I squeeze myself in between some of these crevasses in this 3D background, there is a 0% chance you're getting me out of this aquarium without doing serious damage to the background or the fish itself. And I've learned, of course, so I've got one of the aquariums that's empty right now, but I'm like, if I put any fish in there for quarantine right now, they're going to have to be like really stupid tetras or rasboras. And no offense, I love them both, but they're very, 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 very dumb fish. They just are like, there's a place where I could hide, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay out here in the open and swim back and forth until you catch me. But cichlids, forget it. We had shell dwellers. The Brevis shell dweller in the top middle 40 with a 3D background, and we couldn't get them out of there. There was like 8 or 10 of them. And I'm like, hey, did you get the rest of those bags? Like, they're in between the little tiny space between the end of the 3D background and the glass of the tank. Either we take the background out to get these fish out, or we just leave them for another day. I'm like, forget it. We got to go. Let's just leave them in there. And there are 4 of them. There are still 4 Brevis in one of our quarantine tanks that are like, we know what to do. You stick that big red net in here, pow, we're going right between the glass and the background. Either destroy the background or leave us in here. So they're staying. But they're awesome. The other thing, they're expensive. All right, so 3D backgrounds, a good high quality 3D background, I would say for a 40 breeder, maybe $300-ish. Right? I think that's about what I paid when you include shipping and all that stuff for the background that you're seeing here. That was probably what the cost was. It was about $300 or so. So a 75 gallon, you're looking at least that. Depending on where you go, it could be even more. But definitely the cost is one thing. Catching fish is another. If algae grows, good luck. It's staying on there. Nice thing is it's light. So you're getting that rocky back. And a lot of these companies, they sell 3D rocks that look fairly realistic as well. But we stayed away from them mostly in the gallery because you wanted to have more freedom in how you aquascape the tank. And once you put those backgrounds in, you spend all that money. If you've got a gray background like I showed you before, you're kind of stuck with that theme, right? So if you ever want to change up, like, I think I want to put some brown dragonstone there. Well, that's going to look really good with your gray background, your smooth rock background. So you are kind of stuck in that sense. So yeah, that is a little bit, some things to think about when it comes to backgrounds. And I'm sure there's more things and things that we've left out.
Sure.
Yeah. And even using rocks and things, you were talking about how am I going to do, certain rocks with certain backgrounds. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And again, by the way, if you have questions tonight, please leave the @Primetime Aquatics somewhere in there so that we can more easily see it, because that will help us get to the questions and make sure that we're not missing a whole lot of them, because I'm trying to work with this new system here and figure out what's going on in the chat and how certain things come across. And I think it's working out pretty good. Midwest Aquatics has been a member for 10 months. That's just shy of a year. Happy holidays, everyone. Hit the like button. Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Appreciate you being here and hanging out with us for so long.
Did you say hi and an official thank you to our awesome moderators?
I didn't get a chance to, but hi and thank you to our moderators officially.
Right? We've
really
got
appreciate you being here.
The one and only Oink Master Supreme forever.
Oh, yeah. There's a bunch. Whip.
Second floor.
Nancy. Whip. I meant to say Lynn. I don't know what I meant to say.
Whip.
Nancy. Yeah,
Nancy.
Yeah. No, you said Whip, and I don't know why. I don't even know why. I meant to say Lynn, and Nancy came out of my mouth. So anyway, what's up, everybody? Even if there's a Nancy here, what's up? The Zen celebrates 21 months. Thank you so much. Ooh, 21 months. And hello, Joanna and Jason. Hope you're having happy holidays. We are. I hope you do too. Thank you very much for hanging out with us all this fine time. And we've got all the screens going on here, which is
how do
pretty,
you? It's like war games here.
Well, I know, because now I'm just doing the things, YFI 3-month membership. Sup, Primetime. What's up? You know who it is. It's your boy Jason here coming at you live, and your girl Joanna. She hates it.
Stop. Don't drag me in on that. Oh my gosh, I don't.
Oh, you know what? Oh my gosh, Rebecca, that's a great question. Can you DIY the 3D backgrounds like you can for repariums? Absolutely. I never did that video because I never got around to it. I will at some point, I promise. I had a 3D background. If you go through some of the old fish room tours, what I did is I took styrofoam and I kind of cut it into wavy sort of pieces, measured out, it was a standard 20 gallon, and I kind of cut them out in different waves and silicone them on top of one another, covered them with cement that was painted a gray color. And then the trick is then I siliconed to the back of the tank. I had to do like a dozen water changes in that tank before I put fish in, just because the cement will leach all kinds of stuff, make your water hardness go off the charts. pH will be like a pH of 9. But then, after about a dozen water changes, it all settled in, and I had that background for years and years and years, and it worked just fine. Super cheap. You can express yourself, creatively, artistically, and it worked out. I would say it worked out pretty well. Mm-hmm. So definitely something you can do. Lots of different ways to do it. At some point, I will show you how I did mine, but I don't know when that's going to be.
Andy brings up a really good point. Hey, Andy.
So.
With the 3D backgrounds, are you not worried about the water behind the background going bad?
That is a wonderful question. No, I've never had that issue, but it depends on your filtration too. So when I ordered the last one I did from Aqua Decor, they asked me, what are you using for filtration? And I said, I'm going to be using a canister filter. And they said, fine, we'll make sure that you have a way for the intake to suck water through the entire aquarium, and then the return will do its thing. So if you talk to the people who build the 3D backgrounds, or you build one yourself, first of all, the ones that I did myself, there was no opportunity because it was solid. So it was a solid 3D background that silicone right to the back of the aquarium. So there's no water behind there. But for these other ones, the rock ones that I showed earlier, there is a chance for that to happen. But if you have your intake is most likely going to be behind that 3D background. And most likely what they're going to do is they are going to put some type of a hole there with some type of a screen, or drill small holes in the background itself, so that water is actually getting sucked up through the tank into the background, and then it's getting returned out to the front. So you still should be getting water circulation there. So
I have to leave in like 5 minutes,
right.
so we need to do a giveaway.
All right, we're going to do the giveaway. So let me tell you real quick what the giveaway is all about. And again, this is for our people in the 48 contiguous United States, and you have to be over the 18 contiguous put together 48 states. We got a couple things, and I want to just kind of go all over the place with this, and not super consistent here in terms of a theme, but that's okay. First thing, because I know some of you are going to be setting up a new aquarium, and when you do that, this is the stuff you want, right? The Fritzzyme 7 is incredibly awesome. This is your beneficial bacteria. Fritz is a channel sponsor. They give us cool things to send to you, and I love them because they make super duper high quality products. That's why they're all over the industry these days. Fritzzyme 7, live beneficial bacteria. We add this, especially important for us. Like, we just got a bunch of fish in. Some of the tanks had been sitting empty for the last couple weeks. While the filters still have beneficial bacteria there, we added a little bit more when you're doing a new tank. You add this stuff, and you can add a few fish right when you set up the aquarium, dechlorinate the water, add this stuff, add a couple of fish, and let the bioload catch up. This is crazy important stuff, and we always have it in our house. The other thing, and here's where things get not chemically, we use exclusively Northfin foods in our fish room. And so we've got a few things here. We've got the little sample pack of Krill Pro. These are little tiny sinking pellets. I believe they are 1 mil. So a lot of your bottom feeders, your plecos, your cory cats, your loaches, shrimp love to eat this stuff. So this will feed in small enough where even like tetras and guppies and live bears of all kinds love it. So this is the Krill Pro. And then we also have, and I don't exclusively use this for bettas, but we have the Betta Bites. Betta Bits, sorry. This is really great stuff, and this is also 1 mil, so it's a smaller pellet. And again, I like this because yes, you can feed it to bettas, but you can feed it to all your fish. It's a smaller food, so it's really good for like your tetras and your, like I said, your live bears and things like that. It will fall to the bottom eventually, and your cory cats and your loaches and things, and your shrimp will eat this as well. But don't you worry, we have a bigger bag of the cichlid pellet. I feed this every single day to our fish. This is the 2 mil size, so this is good for some of your obviously your cichlids, like your African cichlids, your small to medium and even large South and Central American cichlids. All of our bottom feeders eat this. Plecos absolutely devour this stuff. Our shrimp will eat it. This is really, really good. And for those of you who are not familiar with Northfin foods, they are one of the highest quality foods, if not the highest quality food on the market today. Absolutely, positively love that food. Like I said, it's the only food that we really feed, prepared foods. So what you have to do is you have to type in a number between 1 and 10. The first person who gets the number between 1 and 10, bros. Wait, I think we're done. Are we done? Yeah.
Really?
That happened fast.
Wow.
We're already done. Let me see the number again. Yeah, we're done. You can stop typing because that happened real quick. So let me, can I just see it one more time? All right. I just want to make sure. And by the way, you want to be on all messages and not top chat or whatever that is, because that's what YouTube defaults to. Do we agree that this is, can you look at your devices as well?
I didn't change mine.
Oh my gosh, you are a disaster. But hold on a second. I just want to confirm, because what in the world? Hold on a second. Are we all on the right thing here? Because let me just make sure. Oh yeah, here we go. Here we go. There we are. That is.
Do that one, right?
Hold on. No, I'm there. Okay. So that's that. Now, are we there? That's that. Okay. So let me just double check this situation here. Oh my gosh, are we stuck? All right. I have. Yeah. Okay, we're good. The first person, go ahead and show the number. Sorry for the delay. Crown Tail Half Moon. You are the winner of today's giveaway. Don't worry. Like I said, we do lots of giveaways. So if you didn't win, there will be more opportunities to win stuff at some point in your life. I promise. So Crown Tail
Half Moon.
I almost said Crown Tail giveaway. Crown Tail Half Moon. Here's what you got to do. You got to send an email with your mailing address and your name to Primetime Giveaway. You didn't say your part.
Singular.
Right. Primetime Giveaway at yahoo.com. And we will get this stuff out to you next week. And congratulations to you for playing along and for everybody for playing the fun game, because that was pretty awesome. And like I said, we do a lot of these. So don't you worry. There's going to be more.
There were some memberships gifted.
There were.
Yeah.
Hold on. I got to go back. Before the giveaway?
Before the giveaway.
Okay. Hold on a second here.
And Ira First thinks that you need a Santa hat.
I might. That's a strong possibility.
I do have a Santa hat.
You have a Santa hat?
I do. I got it for something I got in mind, but yeah, you should see him with a red shirt on. He does look like Santa.
Wait, me? Are you talking about me, bro?
Yes, you look like Santa.
Well, Midwest Aquatics, thank you very much for doing the Primetime Aquatics membership giveaway. And because of that, we got JK Fish Keeping. Oh my gosh, this thing just started skipping around on me. Betta Aquatics and Mimic Nature and Jeremy Platts and Vic are all new members. Thank you. Thank you very much for doing that. That's pretty darn awesome of you. And
so
then
nice.
I also saw, while scrolling around all of these chats, that, hold on, let me go. Now I got to go past all the numbers here because, holy cow. You got to go?
I got to go.
All right, well, you know the deal.
I got to go.
You got to go?
And yeah, Whip, this is the last week for it, and then I got like 3 weeks off that I can stay
the whole time. Yeah, so we get to not talk in front of your back about stuff when that happens.
Right,
So
well, everybody have a great Christmas.
Yeah.
See you next week.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
All right. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nobody probably gets that quote.
What?
Thank you. See if anybody gets it.
Is anybody going to get that?
Probably not.
I don't.
The ladies will.
I don't even know if anybody's going to get that because I don't know what she's talking about. But let me go ahead. Do the scooch. Okay. Move the mic over. Move that one out of my face. And let me, oh my gosh, this is such a thing going on here now. So let me scroll back around. And by the way, if you had a question before all the numbers happened, you'll probably want to ask that question again because they're basically lost. And I don't think, I'm trying to scroll back up. I want to see how far I can scroll with this other thing because I am having issues here getting this. And Andy, by the way, thank you for being a member the last 15 months with the 3D backgrounds. Hold on. With the 3D backgrounds, are you not worried about the water? Oh, that was the one I answered. Anyway, thank you very much for hanging out with us the last 15 months. Really appreciate that. That's awesome. All right, now I'm scrolling all the way down. And now I have, let me get all of my features back over here to all do the same thing because that's going to be better. Oops, I can get rid of that. Okay, now we're back to the bottom of the chat. Lynn says to smash the like button. And yeah, that'll be pretty awesome. All right, let me see here. The goat says, what Tetra Rasbora and how many should I put in a 40-gallon mountainscape? What's your favorite? Well, the nice thing with, if you stay with smaller Tetras and Rasboras, generally speaking, most of them are very tiny. So, I just realized I'm still not centered. That was really annoying. I'm sorry for those of you who are like, dude is not centered. Now I'm a little bit better. Okay, there we go. So with a 40-gallon, whether it's a 40 breeder, it doesn't really matter. I really like the Celestial Pearl Danio, otherwise known as the Galaxy Rasbora. That's a nice blue one where you could easily do a dozen of those things with like a dozen Ember Tetras, which stay pretty small. So now you got this orange color. You've got a nice blue color. what else could you do? You could do with those two types of fish, you could do something like the chili raspberry. It gets a nice, really deep red with a little bit of purple. So those are probably 3 of the ones that I would definitely consider because they are all very, very awesome fish. And Joanna is literally in the chat doing something crazy. And then Lynn said, yeah, mountain minnows for the 40 gallon. Definitely you could do that. White clouds. And the nice thing about the white clouds is you have both the short fin and the long fin variety. You have the standard color, and you also have the golden white clouds. And the golden long fin white clouds are pretty stinking awesome. So definitely something that you could do there for sure. All right, let's see here. Crystal says, are mosquito larvae safe to feed fish? My concern is if mosquitoes pass anything to the larvae. Generally speaking, the stuff that you would cultivate for the aquarium hobby is relatively safe. I know people will keep those things going, but yeah, for the most part, I tend, if it's coming just like straight out of nature, like, oh, you know what, here, I found some larvae, let me just chuck it in my tank. I don't do that. But if you're culturing it specifically for that purpose, then usually it does pretty well, I would say. Joanna, stop photobombing. Yeah. I don't know what's going on. It's like we're being stalked. What's up, Chattanooga Ed? Glad you're here. Good question, Allison. Are my blue dream shrimp safe with my silver tip tetras? The babies aren't. All right, so the silver tips will definitely eat all the shrimplets that they can get their little hands on. The adults, I don't know. We'll find out, right? I mean, they're already in there. So the silver tip tetras don't get huge, but I don't know if I would necessarily trust them around shrimp, but maybe the adult shrimp, especially if they've got some places to hide, they might be okay. But definitely the shrimplets would go missing, would be my guess. Ed says, how can I keep my quarantine tanks cycled? I ended up setting up 3 10 gallons and a 20 gallon because I kept running out of space due to fish not being able to go together. I can tell you what we do. And that is a few things. And I did a video about this at some point. I don't remember when. A couple things to consider. In almost all of our quarantine tanks, I never completely empty them out of fish. Almost always there's a bristlenose pleco in there. And I like that fish for a number of reasons. One, they're very, very hardy, especially when you get them past a couple inches long. And so we breed bristlenose plecos like they're going out of style. So we have a bunch of them. They are just fish where I'm like, I got to get some of them out of our breeding tank. Otherwise, they're going to overpopulate. So I wind up putting them in the quarantine tanks, and then I wind up just feeding those fish when there's no other fish in the quarantine tank, and that generally keeps the tanks minimally cycled. At least there's some beneficial bacteria. The other nice thing is bristlenose plecos tend to eat a decent amount. So you're going to get probably a little bit more waste from them than you would from other fish that you might consider. The other thing that you could do is if you've got a snail population in those tanks, feed the snails. So we have Malaysian trumpet snails all over our fish room. And I can easily take a net full of Malaysian trumpet snails and chuck those things into a quarantine tank and give them an algae wafer. And they're going to do the same things that fish do. They're going to produce the ammonia, and there's going to be waste products that are produced. And so don't overlook the snails for trying to keep things cycled. And then the other thing, and like I mentioned, if you are a fish keeper, this stuff, right? The Fritzheim 7, being able to add this into your aquarium for the quarantine tank. The other thing that you can do is if you're in a situation where you now have multiple tanks, use filter media from an existing tank. As long as that filter media has been in that tank for 3 or 4 weeks, take that out, whether it's filter floss, a sponge, and put that in your quarantine tank. And then once your fish have passed through quarantine, all right, they're okay, and you're going to throw them in your aquarium, you can put that filter media or that sponge back in your existing aquarium, because if your fish pass through quarantine, then you can assume that the other things in that tank have also passed through quarantine. So if you have a sponge filter that maybe you've just kind of got out of the way, it's behind some plants or some decorations, and it's just in that existing tank, and then when you have to set up the quarantine tank, you take that sponge filter out, put it in the QT tank, run your quarantine for 4 weeks, everything goes back in after that. So that's how I handle that. So there's a few different ways that I do that. Christy says, we have a bunch of emerald green carries, but as they've matured, they've gotten very orange. Is that normal? Emerald green carries. Emerald green what's? So, I don't know. Tell me what the emerald greens are, because that would be pretty awesome. One Life says, how many dwarf cichlids can fit inside of a 75-gallon? Part of it depends on the dwarf cichlid and whether or not you're trying to mix them or you're trying to keep a larger colony. I would say if you're trying to keep a larger colony of a single species, that often works out better and you can keep more than trying to mix, like, let's say, oh, I'm going to keep 2 or 3 Apistos, and I'm going to keep a couple of Rams, and I'm going to keep a couple of Crebensis. Sometimes you actually get more infighting than if you were to just do a half a dozen Apistogramma in a 75-gallon and let them kind of figure it out. So usually with the dwarf cichlids, and also keep in mind too, if you do keep them in pairs and you wind up getting them to breed, they're going to be a lot more territorial. So you have to consider that in addition to what type. So in a 75-gallon, I've done, so I can tell you what I've done. I had like 10 Crebensis, and I think it was like 4 males and 6 female Crebensis that lived in a 75-gallon for years. It was planted, well, not with real plants. It had fake plants, fake logs and stuff like that and decorations, but they lived together in that tank for years. I had a half a dozen, I forget the species of Crebensis now because there's different types. Republic Acromis, not Crebensis, but it was Pelvic Acromis subocellatus. I had a half a dozen and 20 long their entire lives. They were fine. And, rams, I've done multiple Bolivian rams before, like a group of 4 or 5. That worked out okay. So safely, maybe a half a dozen. But again, you never know with cichlids. Sometimes they do dumb stuff, and sometimes they get a little aggressive. And the more similar they look, often the more they will target one another. So the safest thing to do is keep a pair. If you want to try to add more, just have a backup plan. Dalton, thank you so much. Dalton Patterson gifted 10 Primetime Aquatics memberships. That is pretty stinking awesome. And because of that, what do we got here? Let's see. We got Malcolm and Doxy and Crystal C and Fish Hippie and Jazzy Bell. And let's see here. Amuse. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. And I'm sure there's others popping up here. We got Adam and we got Bewood. Thank you very much for doing that. That is pretty stinking awesome. Really appreciate it. I hope you all enjoy the experience. That's crazy. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. And so hopefully people will enjoy it, because I hope that I hope it's awesome. David says, I made it to the live stream. What's up? Glad you're here. Glad you're hanging out with us. Let's see here. Sherry says, glowfish are very territorial. I thought they were active fish. They pick a space. They stay there and defend it. Much better now, science, since I added 6 mollies. Yeah, it depends on the size of the tank. And it also depends on the type of glowfish, because there's lots of different types. So you got your glowdanios, you've got the glowfish that look like the skirt tetras. I mean, my gosh, you got glow rainbow sharks. And I know I'm missing a couple because they just keep making new ones. So part of it depends on the size of the tank and the size of the group as well. So if it's the glow tetras or the glow danios, I'd probably want them in groups of at least 10 to kind of cut down on that a little bit and just to make it a little bit more manageable. Ed says, Petco has the Sierra snail catcher that I thought was not made anymore. Just got one yesterday to try and catch some Malaysian trumpet snails in one of my tanks. That's cool. So I was talking to Sierra at one of the Aquashellas. I think it was 2 Aquashellas ago last fall. And the rep there mentioned that thing was coming back out and that she was going to send me one when it did come back out so I could update the video. And they failed to do that. But I am glad they're back out, because I did a video on that particular thing, and people actually accused me in that video of faking it. Like, there's no way that thing caught that many snails. And I was like, yes, it did. So the Sierra snail trap, and I don't know about the new one. I know they made improvements, but it was about yay big. And it had these little plastic things that kind of went in. So the snails could get in. So if you put a piece of food in there, the snails could go in, but they couldn't get back out because those plastic things were on an angle and they were trapped. And I left the thing in overnight, and the whole thing was absolutely 100% jam-packed with snails. It was the coolest thing ever. I used it twice in that aquarium, and there were basically no snails left. And it's one of those things where it's not going to eliminate every single snail that you have, but it's going to eliminate the vast majority of them. And if you use it once or twice a month, trust me, you're not going to have a lot of snails in your tank. At least I didn't once I used that thing. So it was very, very cool. Second floor says 19 likes with 185 watching. That can't be correct. Smash the like button for Jason and Joanna. Sure, why not? Punch the like button right in the face. Drop kick it in the head. That would be pretty cool. All right, let me see here. I am scrolling around. I'm so happy I can actually read this thing. It's very cool. Allison says, because of your species profile, I just got a pair of peacock gudgeons for my 12-gallon bookshelf. They are so tiny and cute. That is cool. That is the perfect tank for them. Those 12-gallon bookshelf tanks are awesome because they're nearly 3 feet long. I think they're like 30 or 32 inches long, something like that. Not super wide. And I'm just kind of spitballing it here, maybe 7 inches wide and 6-7 inches tall, something like that. But it's a ton of space because it's got so much horizontal space. Peacock gudgeons will do great in there because the peacock gudgeons stay small, and that will definitely be an awesome thing. Peacock gudgeons will max out at about 1.5 inches or so. Both the males and the females look amazing. We've got a bunch right now in a 20-gallon. I think we have maybe probably a dozen full-grown peacock gudgeons and probably like 40 or 50 smaller ones, all chilling in a 20-gallon, and they will be going out to the swaps. We've had them now for a while because I absolutely love those fish. I always recommend them when people are looking for a smaller centerpiece fish for a tank that's 10 gallons or greater. The peacock gudgeon is amazing. We've bred thousands because they would lay eggs in a cave, and then as long as you got them out at the right time, and I did a species profile on how to breed them, the number of fry was insane. I mean, you would get hundreds of fry. I can remember we had a 37-gallon, and I put 2 clutches, or I scraped out 2 caves worth of eggs into 1 egg tumbler, and when they all hatched, I don't know how many hundreds of peacock gudgeons I had in that 37, but it was really cool. It was very, very cool. Chorus for Life says, I brought home a 2-inch angelfish that wasn't doing great at my local fish store, swimming in circles and body is diagonal. Fish still eats, temperature 80, and a 60 breeder trying to help this fish. It could be a lot of things. It could be some kind of a swim bladder issue. I would somewhat worry about even fish TB can really mess up the way that fish swim at times. I don't bring home fish that I know are diseased. I know it's sad to see them at a pet store and they're not doing well, but there's a couple reasons why. One, I know a lot of people like to rescue bettas at like the Petcos and the PetSmarts of the world. To me, that just encourages them to treat fish poorly because there's going to be somebody there that's going to rescue them. And I know it's tough. I mean, don't get me wrong. You have a heart of gold if you're going there and be like, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to try to save this fish. That comes from an awesome place. But for me, I won't do it for 2 reasons. One, I don't want to encourage the stores that are doing that to keep doing that. Now there's always going to be somebody there to bail them out. And then 2, I never, ever, ever want to purposely bring fish into my fish room that I know are sick. It's hard enough getting fish through quarantine. It's hard enough even when fish look healthy to get them to a point where you feel comfortable putting them in your aquarium, even after 4 weeks of quarantine. If I see sick fish at a pet store, not only do I not buy them, I don't touch any of the fish in that tank, and I'll actually sit back and I'll watch, especially if there's other people in the pet store. What are they doing with their nets? What are they doing with, are they sharing nets between all the different tanks? Because if that's the case, then if those fish are sick, especially when they've got, you walk into some pet stores and it's like, oh my gosh, the lights are on in that tank. They are probably pulling fish in that tank and the fish are crawling with some type of bacterial infection or ick, or they're all super skinny. And now they're using those nets to catch the fish out of that tank. And then they're using the same nets because a lot of times you're like, oh, I'll take 3 of these. And then over in that tank, I'll take 5 of those. And over in that tank, I'll take 6 of those. And guess what? If they just went in that sick tank and grabbed that net and like, okay, here you go. And then they bag them up. They take that same net. They go to the next tank. They're just spreading whatever's in there. And I can't do it. I don't want to purposely bring stuff home. But in terms of the angelfish, yeah, I don't know what's going on there. I would, and it's in a 75 gallon, so it's already in your aquarium. I'm assuming is your display tank, because I don't think many people use a 75 as a quarantine tank. So that could be, personally, I would get it out of there. I would not put it in my display tank knowing that there's something wrong with it, because if it's got something, it could, if it's bacterial, if it's protozoan, if it could spread to other fish, and then it gets really hard to treat all those other fish. McNature says, I agree, not rescuing chain store bedders. Like I said, I get it, man. It comes from a great place. So I'm not trying to knock people who do it, because I know that, it's just your heart breaks for when you see animals, whether it's fish, dogs, it doesn't matter. Not that people are animals, but when you see things that are suffering, it can be really, really tough. Aquarium Background Tape says, I have 6 tanks. Do you use and or recommend a net dip? Great question. So what we do with our nets is, for the most part, again, we abide by the 4-week quarantine process. So all of the tanks that are not quarantined, I don't worry about it at all, because it's exceptionally rare that we have any fish that are sick in our non-quarantine tanks. So I don't really worry about using nets from one tank to another. But when it comes to quarantine, we have a lot of nets. We have, I don't know, dozens and dozens of nets. So when it comes to, like, for instance, when we got our big shipment in last week and we brought in a whole mess load of fish, I would use one net for one species of fish, because they all came from the same tank, even if they're in different bags. And then I would use different nets for different species of fish, but then all of those nets go in a bucket that we would certainly, definitely not use in any of our other tanks or in any other situation. So those nets go in a 5-gallon bucket. They sit behind our sink. First thing I do is I let them dry. Drying kills a lot of stuff, and I don't think people realize just how effective. Just the fact that when you have a piece of equipment that dries, a lot of these parasites that are living in an aquatic environment, they die, right? Unless they are cyst or spore formers, maybe some viruses, but for the most part, a lot of this stuff dies. Then, after the nets have dried, I will go ahead and fill the bucket up with a 10% bleach solution and really hot water, like really hot, like just be careful hot. And I will leave it sit overnight. And then all the nets come out. I rinse the nets off, and then I let them dry again. And with that, I cannot recall ever having spread anything around the fish room. But I am just a 10% bleach solution guy, and I know that there is a case to be made that when you use 10% bleach solution, that some of your nets might start to look a little gnarly after a couple years. I don't worry about it. I'll go get the nets are like $2, right? You go on Amazon, they sell nets for very, very little money. So I don't mind just buying new nets when I need them. Oink says, I'm going to take this betta home to try to save it once, and it was still heartbroken when I couldn't. Yeah, and that's a good point too. If you can't save the fish, and it's like, oh man, that was a little rough. Yeah, that can definitely be a bad day for sure. Second floor says, I don't have that problem. I have both of those plus, okay, so you're talking to other people about cool fish. That's awesome. Love it. Robin says, my electric blue acara loves to hunt and demolish snails. Oh my gosh, yeah, my electric blue acara, same thing. I don't make an effort. There's 2 things in the fish room I don't make an effort to control anymore. It's a lost cause, and that is snails and duckweed. I'm sorry, I don't find either one of those to be particularly appealing, but I also am like, you know what, forget it. If it's in a tank, it's in a tank. If it's not, whatever. So any tank that is missing one of those 2 things or both is because there's something in there eating it. So I am 95% sure by bringing a lot of red rainbows, I'm pretty sure they're eating duckweed, because in the 2 tanks that I was quarantining red rainbow fish, the duckweed was gone, like completely gone. And when it comes to snails, if there are no snails in the tank, it's because something in there is eating them. So a lot of your loaches will eat them, certainly like your clown loaches, your red-tailed boteas. We just brought a bunch of those, and I love that. It's one of my favorite loaches, the red-tailed botea. Most of your cichlids, the vast majority of your cichlids, whether they're African cichlids or New World cichlids from South or Central America, they will eat some snails. I used to love feeding just like the pond snails to tinfoil barbs, bala sharks, silver dollars, but there's quite a few fish. If you have a smaller planted tank and you're looking for a smaller loach that will eat snails, the dwarf chain loach will do that, but be aware that sometimes they can kind of pester other fish, even though they're very, very tiny little loaches, but they will definitely eat some loaches too, eat some snails if you have that problem. S. Martin, will an electric blue car eat near ice snails? Yeah, they don't make a distinction. So there's no snails, no invertebrates. Here's my general rule of thumb. No invertebrates are safe with cichlids. That's just, sometimes it works out. I told the story maybe last week or the week before. I had a couple of very, very, very large gold mystery snails. They were huge in a Simulus shell dweller tank, and somehow they lived their whole life and were left alone. But if you look at that tank, it was like a graveyard for all the pest snails and even the Malaysian trumpet snails. Same thing with my multi, that 50-gallon lowboy filled with the multi-shell dweller. There used to be a ton of pest snails in there. And eventually, because there was so much food competition, because there were so many fish in that tank, they ate all the snails. They ate all the Malaysian trumpet snails. So, yeah, it was crazy. They just devour them. But I never, ever, ever trust cichlids around invertebrates. That goes for shrimp, snails. I just assume they are going to eat them when they get a chance. Steel Wave says, I've lost a couple multis suddenly in the last month with no signs of disease. The only change was a large male bristlenose pleco I added after quarantine. Could it be aggression? Maybe, but I don't find them to be particularly aggressive to the point where they would kill another fish, especially even at like a 20-gallon or larger. As long as they have the space, I do make a point to try and make sure that the tank is not super, super, super overcrowded, but I also don't pay like crazy attention to it either because there are so many fish. So for instance, in our 20-gallon long, we've got the Simulus shell dweller, which is basically the same thing with a slightly different color. They behave a little bit differently, I will say, but I probably had, I don't even know, maybe 50 at least in that 20 long, counting all the little fry. And I never noticed any of the fish dying in there. In the low boy, there could be 300 or 400, if not more, multis in that 50-gallon low boy, which is 4 feet long by 24 inches, so 2 feet, 4 feet by 2 feet by 10 inches tall. And I've never noticed dead fish in those tanks. Now, part of that is I have bristlenose plecos in there, and usually if a fish dies, it's very rare that I see the fish in that tank. Even with some of our Mbuna 75, there will be times where I lose fish there. And because we have 3 or 4 bristlenose, I will just look in the tank in the morning like, oh, they've got a fish in there. And within hours, it's gone. So, but yeah, I don't know about the aggression thing unless it was really overcrowded, not enough shells. But I haven't really noticed that in my setups, but then again, I don't pay a ton of attention because we've always got so many of the fish. So losing 1 or 2, I would never notice it. Crystal says, bought young plecos, a bristlenose and a clown, that have been quarantined for 3 weeks. Bristlenose disappeared, assumed dead. Should quarantine go for another 4 weeks? Great question. I would. Why not? I mean, you already got the quarantine tank set up. The bristlenose is no longer there. You don't know what happened to it. You're assuming that it died from something. I will say young bristlenose. So if you buy bristlenose like maybe under 2 inches, sometimes they're not the hardiest thing. They're not necessarily diseased. They just get stressed out. If you talk to people in the industry that are wholesalers and stuff, they'll tell you a lot of times very small angelfish and small bristlenose ship not the best. So even though like bristlenose are very common and a lot of people breed them in the home aquarium, when you get them from the pet store, if they are buying them from a source where they went from overseas to, an importer to a wholesaler to a pet store and then to your aquarium, that's a lot of moving. It's a lot of stress. It could be a lot of changes in water parameters, and young, small bristlenose don't do well. If it's a little bit larger, they tend to be more hardy and withstand those changes a little bit more. At least in my experience, that's what's happened. But yeah, I would quarantine for just keeping that clown pleco in there for another 4 weeks, just to make sure that there's not something weird going on. You'd rather, if it's going to happen, hopefully it doesn't, if you're going to lose that clown pleco, you'd probably want to lose that in the quarantine tank and not have it spread something to your display tank and then wind up with a bigger issue, because that would be bad. The Zen says, out of all y'all's tanks, what tank or even breed of fish do you find yourself watching the most? That's a great question. Which one do I watch the most? Believe it or not, at this point, it's almost more about the environment in total. It's not even about my favorite fish necessarily. I have got an aquarium, and I showed this, I think it was on the members video maybe a month ago. I don't know. It's a mistake. I would never recommend this. Not in a million years would this be a good idea. And I plan to fix this as soon as we have the space all situated. But I have a 75 gallon right now. Joanna had to throw in, she needed a place where, as we were breaking tanks down, she had these massive Anubias. So she chucked this Anubias in this 75 gallon, and it started to attach itself to wood, and now it's huge, and it looks absolutely fantastic. And she put some jungle val in there, and somehow that's now rooted down, and possibly some crypts. So all of a sudden, this tank that just had rocks and a big old piece of wood is now this heavily planted tank that consists of a bunch of fish that came from other tanks temporarily. And so we have red-tailed botillas, snakeskin barbs, glass cats, 4 fancy goldfish. They are leaving that tank. Don't worry, they're not staying in there. Synodontis cats, small, dwarf petricola. What else is in there? There's a couple other things. An albino heckelei, dumbest combination ever. Don't do it. I don't recommend it. But I love watching that tank because the snakeskin barbs are one of my favorite barbs, and they stay together. They actually school fairly tightly for a barb even, and they kind of go in and out of all of the plants. And the 5 glass cats, I think I said glass cats. That's what I meant. I hope I didn't say for some reason I'm remembering I said iridescent shark, and that is not what I meant. Glass cats, that is one of the coolest fish. And you got all these other fish that are in there, and it's just so cool. It's one of my favorite tanks to look at. The other one is, and I showed it earlier, might as well just bring it back up while it's sitting here. And that's this tank here, is probably one of my favorites to watch. And the reason why I love it so much is, and I hope it's coming up here pretty soon. Let me see if it does. There we go. I love it because it's got the Congo tetras, and the volcano bitterling barb is one of my favorite fish. What's not totally obvious in that tank is there's a ton of rare fish in there. So not only do you have the volcano bitterling, but you also have the dwarf mouth brooder, which is a really cool, very small cichlid that gets a lot of yellow and a lot of blue. There are some microtinopoma in that tank, which are also amazing fish and not entirely common. And then in there is also one of my blue phantom plecos. And so along with a couple of really pretty super red bristlenose, it's just an outstanding tank. I absolutely love that particular aquarium. So those are probably 2 of my favorites to look at right now. I do like the new Lake Tanganyika setup, the 75 we did in the gallery, and I'm having a feeling I'm going to really love the tank that we're in the middle of setting up, because that one is really cool. So I'm liking the way the scape has turned out, and I think it's going to be, it's going to be awesome. MNC says, sometimes the catch-all tanks are the best. I agree. I've had that happen a number of times where we just have these tanks. You're like, I don't know how this combination happened. I don't know how I'm going to undo the combination, but it's just really working right now. The other one that I like a lot is we have a 125 with our Viejas and Spilum. There's 10 of those fish in there right now with our red spot gold severum. Really just a chilled out tank. The fish are getting along great, and it's awesome. Leslie said, a bristlenose unalived my glass catfish. I was furious, but he passed shortly thereafter. I guess they got each other. Wow, that's crazy, because bristlenose, they can be, when they get established in an aquarium, and they're usually when you put them in there first, sometimes they're kind of shy and they will hide, and they will do that a lot when they're cichlids. But once they understand this is where the food is, especially male bristlenose, when they're at that 5 or 6 inch fully grown mark, they can be rambunctious to say the least. And especially with other bottom dwelling fish, sometimes they can really get other fish out of the area. But I've never really had them attack any fish that just because they wanted to. J Matt says, any luck with Galaxy Rasbora? All kinds of luck. We've got 300 of them right now in our fish room going through quarantine. Yeah, so love them. I bring them in all the time because they're one of the Rasboras I find to be super hardy. And we when I say that, it's like I've got thousands of data points. So if I keep bringing in 300, 400, 500 at a time, and I'm only losing, I lost 3, I lost 4, I lost 5. I'm like, that's insane when it comes to survival rates and just how well they do. And they're very rarely ever sick. They very rarely show any signs of disease. The few times where I've had issues, where at one point I had an ick outbreak in one of my Galaxy Rasbora tanks, I treated that with IckX, and it was all cleared up within about 4 or 5 days. And they're just amazing fish, absolutely outstanding. So, lots of good luck with them as Rasboras go. Probably one of my favorites in terms of being hardy. The other one is the brilliant green Rasbora, but those are up there for sure. Absolutely love them. Wanda says, watch every time I can. Love you guys. Content both channels. My dilemma is I have had a 29 gallon and have one goldfish. My tank was cycled, now 20 parts per million nitrate, zero nitrite, half part per million of ammonia. So I would do a couple things with that. If nothing has changed in that aquarium, I would do a few things. One, I would check your tap water. Just make sure your tap water has no ammonia in it. And maybe it doesn't, but your strips are still showing ammonia. So it could be, or your liquid stuff, it could be a faulty test thing. It could be there's ammonia in your tap water. If anything happened where there was a blip in power, where the filter went out for a while or something like that, a half a part per million is not the end of the world. So usually that corrects itself pretty quick, especially if you've never had that issue before. It usually doesn't stay elevated for very long. I also did a video at one point. I think it was titled "Why Your Water Test Kit May Be Lying to You," and I go over some reasons why. There's different types of ammonia. There's good and bad ammonia. It's the unionized ammonia, UIA. That's the bad type. And depending on your pH and the temperature and the salinity of your water, sometimes you can be reading an ammonia concentration with the test strips and the liquid test kits, but it's not actually the bad ammonia. It can stress people out then when they do the calculations, and I show people how to do that in the video. It sometimes is not a big deal. So I would definitely check out that video if you can and see if maybe that particular situation is not as bad as it looks, or again, half a part per million, as long as it's not going up, it doesn't go any higher. Usually that stuff corrects itself pretty darn quick. Second floor says, my male snow white bristlenose bullies his way to the food. He's not shy at all. Yeah. And by the way, the snow white bristlenose, they're really starting to finally, I see them more now at the swaps, and they're starting to come onto the market, which is pretty cool. I remember, at the swaps, they're still going for like 30 or 40 bucks a piece, at least around our area. They've been pretty expensive. I expect, give it a year while people are breeding them and stuff, and they'll come down in price quite a bit, but really cool. The snow whites, they're different from the albinos. I mean, they are definitely a white color. The only thing that I'm curious about with the snow white bristlenose is I've already heard people saying that some of them were going blind. Now, usually that's an albino thing, so I'm surprised I was hearing about the snow whites, but I would definitely be interested to hear in like 6 months to a year, is it still acting normally? Is everything okay? So, yeah. And she says, my filters in tap water have for years. I'm assuming rinsing, because I do that all the time. Yeah, all the time. I am rinsing my media, my sponge filters, my media, all in chlorinated tap water. It's in there for 10, 15, 20 seconds, right back in the tank it goes. I've never had an ammonia spike because of it. Let's see here. Okay, let me scroll around. I feel like I might have missed some things. And now with this new chat thing going on, the highlights no longer show, which is kind of crazy. So I'm going to do something else and see if I can do that. Okay. Now, so that's cool, because now in my new little chat thing, if I just type in Prime, then I see all the things that came to me, like people saying, that at Prime Time Aquatics thing, that's a new way to do it. So how about that? Anthony W., what you got here? He says, I just brought home 4 yo-yo loaches to help control the snails in my tank. Yeah, that'll definitely do it. Oh my gosh. So one of the other things that I brought in that I haven't before, and the giant coolie loach. They are bigger than the standard coolie loaches. You want to talk about creepy. Now, I've mentioned that one of the things that creeps me out in the aquarium hobby is the bamboo shrimp, because I think they look like underwater cockroaches. They act like them. They'll crawl on your hands. They'll crawl out of the nets. They creep me out, even though I do think they're awesome. The other thing that's kind of creepy is when you hold up a bag of 400 giant coolie loaches and they're going nuts. And then what's even creepier is when you dump that into a bucket and you're scooping them out and they're all freaking out and they're looking like a bunch of worms, and then you chuck them in the tank, like whoosh, they're going everywhere. If you are somebody who I don't really like snakes, and the coolie loaches sort of kind of creep you out, but they're kind of cute when there's 1 or 2, trust me, when there's 400 and they're all freaking out, it can be a little on the creepy side for some people. I could totally see that. Yep. Let's see. Cody says, sadly, the cardinal tetras I bought from you have slowly become food for my apisto Oh my gosh, that Episto is, I'm surprised because those cardinal tetras were pretty stinking big. So that's crazy. That's not cool. Not cool at all. Second floor says, that hurts. Coolies are awesome. They are awesome. But again, you have to imagine 400 of them going absolutely nuts. And it's a little wacky. I'm not going to lie. MSC says, just bought 8 of the bitterlings today. Beautiful fish, but a tad pricey. A tad pricey? Yeah, they're very pricey. Even for me at the swaps, they are like, I think I saw them for like $12 a piece. So they're just expensive. I mean, and the other thing too is people are asking me, how do you breed them? And when I did the species profile, I didn't mention breeding them because I don't have personal information, experience breeding those fish. But the more I read about them, they need clams, live clams to breed. So it's like, they're going to stay expensive because you're going to have to catch them from their source. I shouldn't say that. Maybe somebody will figure out an alternative way to breed them, and maybe they already have, and I just don't know. But from what I've read, and don't quote me on this because I've done very little research, but from what I understand, these particular fish, the volcano bitterlings, use a clam, like a live clam, to incubate their eggs and the big spawns. But it's complicated to say the least. So I don't know if we're going to be seeing a whole lot of those bad boys coming through the markets because I don't know where they're getting them from. I mean, I'm assuming they're just getting them from the Ngati River, but I don't know for sure. Second floor says, put at Primetime Aquatics in front of your question to help me see it. Yep, that would be pretty awesome if that would happen. Leslie says, we heard a loud noise in the fish room, and my husband yelled, there's a fish on the floor. It was my weather loach. Oh my gosh, I could imagine. He lived, but he was hard to grab up. They're very slippery. Yes, they are. Oh my gosh, I can imagine. Yeah, every once in a while, it's just one of those things. You've been keeping fish for long enough, and you are going to wind up with fish on the floor at some point for some reason. And it can be exciting, especially when they're spazzing out and they're flopping all over the place. There have been times where I've done this a couple of times with my family watching, so they saw it happen where the fish would like flop up and I'd catch it midair and right back in the tank it went. They're like, whoa, that's crazy. Yeah, that doesn't happen very often, but yeah, especially the small ones. Oh my gosh. So last week when I was getting the fish out of the bags when we got the shipment, I was dumping in Furcata rainbows, and they were small. They're little bitty guys, under an inch right now, and there was like 300 of them in the bag, and so I'm dumping these things in, and as I'm doing it, they're going into the net like that's in a bucket of the bag water. But they're jumping, and they're like, pow, pow, pow. And there was like 3 or 4 of them. They're like, and they hit the floor. I'm like, by the way, here's a trick. If that ever happens, if you ever got a small fish that you just cannot grab off the floor, piece of paper, right? Take a piece of paper and very gently try to get that piece of paper under the fish, and that will help you get it off the floor. Because sometimes you got a wet fish, especially if it's smaller and it's stuck to the floor. You're like, I don't know what to do. And you're freaking out because the fish is on the floor. If you can get a piece of paper under there, that can help a lot. Drew says, do you ever deal with snails? Fish keeper, bro. We all deal with snails. It's just what we do. Yes, I deal with snails quite a bit. My story is I don't really deal with them. I just let them be. The biggest thing with snails is to control the amount of food that they have access to. And when you do that, you can control the populations. They're not going to just indefinitely grow to the part where it's like, I have no water in my tank. It's all just snails. They can grow to an excessive population, but if you control the food that they have access to, you can, in fact, control snail populations. But to me, it's like a multifaceted thing. It's control the food. If your tank can have inhabitants that can eat the snails, great. If you want to add 6 to 10 assassin snails, the trick with the assassin snails is add more than you think you need, because people will put in 1, 2, or 3 and be like, man, they really didn't do anything. Well, you got to add more. So if you can add, like I said, 6, 8 of them, 10 of them, depends on the size of your tank. I wouldn't do that to a 5-gallon, but if you had a 20-gallon, certainly that could work. So if you're controlling food, you've got some type of predator in there, either assassin snails or some type of fish that will eat them. That can help. That Cirrus snail trap I thought was amazing. You put some food in there, they go in there. You're not going to get rid of every single one unless you've got fish in there that are consistently eating them. But you can definitely get rid of a lot of them doing that, to the point where it's not an eyesore and you're not looking at this thing going like, Oh my gosh, what a mess. Aquarium Background says, how many tanks do you have and how often do you do water changes? So we've had as many as 80 aquariums, and since we went from one side of the fish room, we converted to a gallery, we're going to wind up with about 40, so we cut that number in half. Almost every tank that we have, with the exception of a few, like these ones, basically don't get water changes. They get top-offs. We've been doing that for as long as we've been in this studio. No issues. Plants are loving it. You can see the fish back there and the shrimp all going crazy. But downstairs in the fish room and now the gallery side, every tank for the most part is getting some type of water change every single week, but the percentages vary based on whether or not it's planted and ultimately the bioload and ultimately the nitrate concentrations. So if we have a really heavily planted tank that's lightly stocked with nanofish, maybe it only needs 5 to 10% per week. Our cichlid tanks that are heavily stocked are like our 125 is heavily stocked. Our Mbuna tank, the 75 gallon is heavily stocked. Those might be getting 80% water changes once a week. Bristlenose breeding tank easily gets 80 to 90% once a week. Could you break that up and do smaller water changes more frequently? Yes. But I use nitrate, and I did a video on how much you should, what you use to determine water changes, but we use nitrate concentrations. Our goal is to try to keep nitrate concentrations at 20 parts per million or less through the entire span from one water change to the next. So it should never be getting much above 20 parts per million. That's what we do. That's how we roll. Little Fret says, I have 2 Tidal 110s on my 90 gallon. Seems like polyfill clogs up way too quick, as in 2 days the bypass is in full effect. No channels talk about the PPI of foam pieces. You can get 20 to 50. So a couple things. I actually have done videos on this as it relates to sponge filters, and actually I did a video on this at one point, like what foam I like to use. I like to use a very fine sponge. In other words, I like to have a lot of pores per square inch, because the finer it is, the more it's going to trap stuff. The Tidal 110s are great. The big thing that I've found there is it comes with that bottom piece of sponge, but then when I'm using like the filter floss type stuff, I stack it vertically, and that tends to help with the bypass where more water is going through the actual filtration. But that bottom sponge does an amazing job of trapping stuff, and it might just be, in some ways, I get what people are saying about, oh, you know what, this thing clogs so fast and now it's going through a bypass. Okay, that's fine. But that also means it's doing its job, right? If it's catching a lot of stuff very, very quickly, that's ultimately what we want. And so if those things are clogging every couple of days, rinse it out. You don't have to put new polyfill or new filter floss in the filter. In fact, we do that very rarely. We will take the filter floss and the sponge in the bottom of that Tidal 110 or Tidal 75 or 55 or 35. We'll take that sponge, we'll rinse it in tap water real quick, put it back in the bottom of the container that it comes in, and then rinse out. I like to use the blue bonded sheet because you can reuse that stuff for many, 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 many weeks. It just goes in the sink, squeeze it out till all the brown stuff starts coming out, back in the filter, it goes vertically, and then back in the tank. So it's probably out of the water for no longer than maybe 30 to 45 seconds. So it's not killing a lot of your beneficial bacteria. But that's what we do. We do that every single week. And if it's clogging faster, we just, it takes 2 seconds to pull that thing out, rinse it out, put it back in. But I don't put fresh filter media in there every time I do that because it's just not necessary to do that. But good question. It's just one of those things like, oh, it's clogging. Well, that's because it's catching the stuff. That's what we want, right? But yeah, it kind of stinks when it's like, oh, it's clogging. I got to keep redoing it. But if you keep doing it, that's how your tank is going to look awesome if you can keep doing that. Noel says, my Tidal in a pretty heavily stocked 100 gallon. Yeah. And I've got the Tidal 110 in a very heavily stocked, not a very heavily stocked, I guess it is. The 125 is the 10 Vieja, the couple bristlenose, and the almost full grown Severum. They eat a lot of food. So I take those Northfin floating food sticks, a big handful, like boom, there you go, a couple times a day, and they devour that stuff. So, and it does a great job. I've got a couple of sponge filters in there as well, but it works out very well. And yeah, we do have to maintain it probably more than once a week. Leslie says, is it feasible to put a loach in a small tank temporarily to eat the snails, or would it be stressful for the loach? it'd probably be stressful for the loach. Then you got to try to get it out of there and stuff. But I mean, people do it. People will do the rent a fish where, if you've got a couple bristlenose plecos and they go through and they clean up a tank, or some mystery snails and they clean up a tank, like, oh, that one's a mess, I'll put them in there. People do it. It's not unheard of. It's not like some crazy thing that's like off the wall. But the more you move a fish, the more it can stress. But the nice thing is you're not moving it very far, and most likely all the water parameters are the same. I wouldn't do that if I, let's say, had an aquarium that had tap water and it was high water hardness and a high pH, and then all of a sudden you're throwing it in your tank with 50% RO. That could be a bad situation. But if the tanks have similar water parameters, yeah. And Andy, same thing. I agree with you. The dwarf chain loach for smaller tanks, like I said, just be a little bit careful with them. I'd love to hear your experience. I found them to be a little bit aggressive towards one another, and they can be, let's just say, aggressively curious with other fish at times, but not necessarily like real problematic. But they do a good job with the smaller tanks for sure. All right, we'll answer a couple more here, and then we'll think about, going night-night. Oh, here we go, Christy. We got a bunch of emerald green corridors, and they turned orange as they matured. So my thought is that you did not get emerald green corridors. What you got were Venezuela cories, because that's what they do. So Venezuela cories are amazing fish. And when they're really small, they'll have a hint of orange at the top of their body. And the really, like the good ones, because I'll bring in the Venezuelas that they're called the oranger variety. And even at a smaller size, they show a decent amount of orange. But as they get older, the orange takes over the top of their body, and they still have a little bit of green at the bottom. But if you got that, cherish it, because the Venezuela cories can be pretty expensive. So I would definitely, and even the emerald greens, they can do that too a little bit. They can get some orange iridescence to their body as well. We've brought those in before as well, but you might have gotten Venezuelas. So, but yeah, the emeralds will do that sometimes too. All right, let me see here. Second floor says, I've noticed that they like to nip fins and bully the nicer fish in the tank. Yeah, if you're talking about the dwarf chain loaches, sometimes they will do that. It's not unheard of. All right, y'all, I think we're going to call it an evening because it's getting late for all of us people who, some of you have to go to work in the morning and everything. But thank you so much for being here, hanging out with us this fine evening. Thank you to all the people who gifted memberships and the super chats. And thank you for our moderators hanging out with us tonight. We're going to be back next week. It will be the day after Christmas next week. But everybody have a great Christmas and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. And hope if some of you are getting a break, enjoy it, right? Try to relax a little bit. That's part of the fun of this time of the year, hopefully. But yeah, definitely. We will see y'all next week. Same time, same place. Thank you so much for being here. Good night, everybody.